Yeah.
Where are we? This one? How and why did I get involved in human rights activism? I don't know. I mean, I've been involved in issues of human rights since I was in high school, so I don't know that there was like any specific catalytic moment that I thought like, oh, I have to be involved in these issues. I think as I always worked on issues of, you know, like I did some AIDS activism in high school and some fundraising for cancer, friends who had cancer and stuff, but it wasn't until college that I started really working on women's issues, or advocating for women's rights specifically, and I think that that probably happened as a result of always feeling sort of tied to issues that related to girls and women, but then taking a lot of courses in college that were gender focused and really starting to understand what women's position was in the US and abroad, and that just seemed so wrong to me, that there were so many issues that just didn't feel right, like, you know, whether it was that there were disproportionate amounts of women that were being, you know, violent crimes were committed against women, or that women didn't have the same access to resources. Like, there were all of these things, and I knew about all these issues and thought that they were all issues that we should address, but then it seemed like women were constantly, you know, not getting what they needed. And so I think that around that time I started to really focus on issues of women's rights, and then specifically on issues of violence. And then once that happened, it just was like, I can't not do it now. You know, you started doing it, and then every time I was involved in something similar but not quite women or not quite girls, I was just always really unsatisfied. So I had to keep coming back to issues of women and girls to really feel like it satisfied me. So, you know, in some ways it's very sort of it feels good. I mean, it feels good to do this kind of work because you feel like you're helping people and it makes a difference, and it's also, there's a real need for it. So,
did you major in women's studies?
I did, yeah. I majored in women's and gender studies, and actually transferred from the university that I was at because they didn't have a program. And so I transferred to Rutgers, and I hadn't even started there, and I went into the department and I said, I'm doing a major in this. And they said, well, you know, do you want to feel it out first? And I said, I don't. I know I'm going to do this. And I have not regretted it a single day since. It was like the best program I've ever done. And it just filled me with a community of activists, and it was a department that really fostered activism. So I think in some more traditional disciplines, like if you study, you know, maybe if you study like political science in a traditional department, or if you study economics, people don't really get that activism is like core to what you're learning. But in gender studies, where I was at Rutgers, they really got that. And so I had whole semesters where most of what I was doing was activist based, and I was getting credit for it. So it was like really a time to develop that kind of work, which was very, very cool.
Cool.
Yeah. College is awesome for that. It's like the best time because you tap into all these people who are creative and interesting and wanting to do stuff, and you have professors who want to help you do that, and you have all this time. I mean, you're busy with schoolwork, but there's also all this other time where you're living there, you know, and you can just do so much damage. It's fabulous, you know. I don't mean damage in a bad way.
I don't. Please define damage.
Damage. I mean, damage is like the Vagina Monologues. How many of you have seen the Vagina Monologues? Anybody?
I kind of.
Okay, the Vagina Monologues is a play that was written by Eve Ensler, who's an activist for women's rights, and she started doing all of these interviews with women about their vaginas, actually, and their experiences. And what it sort of formulated into was all of these women talking about their experiences sort of being women, and a lot of the stories ended up being about all types of, you know, violence, and in some cases, you know, birth or menstruation, but a lot of them really talked about their experiences sort of being women in a world that marginalizes women. And they're really, really, it's a fabulous play. It's been probably produced for 15 years now. And when I was in college, there's a college campaign, so you can actually get the rights to do the play for free. You don't have to pay for it. And then you do all this fundraising as part of the show, and you invite all these people, and then all the money goes back to the organization. So we did this, and, you know, I mean, it was a pretty big deal to be talking about these kinds of things on campus. So we just, like, you know, really could kind of have a presence and get people riled up, which is a lot of fun because people are learning about stuff. It's provocative, but it's also, you know, you're working like, it's like 1 o'clock in the morning, you're at FedEx and you're with your friends and you're making photocopies, and it's just, there's a whole sense of community around it that's really intoxicating, I think. Should I keep going down the list?
Yes. So how did you come to work on your issue?
On my issue.
So trafficking.
Well, I work on a lot more than trafficking. And in fact, trafficking is just sort of like one part of things. But I started my PhD in New York and didn't really know what my dissertation was going to look at, and was trying to figure it out, and started to look a lot at the movement, people moving literally across borders. A lot of issues related to immigration, and then I started to sort of understand more and more about this issue of trafficking. So, you know, moving people across borders or internal borders. And it just really struck a chord, I think, because I had been living abroad in Costa Rica for a number of years, so I had seen that type of movement happening for reasons of labor, so economic reasons, people moving back and forth, and people being moved back and forth. So there are two different things. You know, one is obviously legal, the other is not. And so I had seen it and understood it, but I really wanted to understand it better. And so that's when I started doing a lot more research on it, and decided that would be what I did my dissertation on. And then at the end of the year, after the first year of my doctorate, I decided to take a leave from the program and got an offer from GLI to come on as their program director. And it was a great way for me to take what I had been thinking about and learning about and really get into it in a much more hands-on way. So I was able to go into GLI and then start thinking about, you know, how does the curriculum deal with these issues? Are girls understanding these issues? And so that's kind of how I ended up focusing from women to girls. It was just sort of a shift because I had shifted from an academic world into a nonprofit that looked at girls.
So what exactly is your work at GLI? Like, what do you do?
So I manage all the programming and a lot of the day-to-day functionings of the organization. So everything from sort of looking at the program that we produce and how girls are learning it, to evaluating, you know, what needs to be improved, how do we improve that, and then doing a lot of working with other organizations. So we probably work with 30 organizations overseas. And the GLI program is domestically based, and what we try to do is we set up chapters here, and the girls in our program here learn about issues of human rights and girls' rights and access to education and trafficking and all of these things. And part of that learning happens by communicating with their partners in another country, usually in the global south. So I work with...
Yeah, we have one here.
So I work with a lot of organizations that are in other countries that are running schools. And so a lot of my job and a lot of my time is spent talking to people abroad and saying, you know, what's happening in your schools, what's happening in this particular province in Afghanistan, are the schools still running, are girls getting what they need, what kinds of projects would be useful to you, if our girls here are developing a cultural exchange project, do you want it to focus on something specific? You know, is there a theme that you think your girls would be interested to see from an American perspective? So those are the kinds of conversations that I'm having with people abroad. And then another level of my work is the stuff that I do at the UN. So I work with a coalition of groups at the United Nations, which is the Working Group on Girls. And it's just like a whole bunch, I would say it's probably 40 organizations maybe, that come together once a month and sit down and say, you know, these are the issues that are coming up at the UN, these are resolutions that are being written, or these are documents that are being produced, and no one's talking about girls. So how do we take this stuff that's coming out of the UN and make sure that there's some focus on girls? And so a lot of my work focuses on that. So there's sort of a lot of different things. When you go into nonprofit work, you sort of have one little job description, then you do a million different things. So,
all right. Do you actually meet with the victims or like?
No, I don't do any victim work. My work is very much with students like you. So it's students who tend to be learning about the issues more than going through the issues. The times that I meet people who've gone through this they're not in the GLI program. It tends to be my work at the UN. So there'll be people who, you know, were trafficked, were victims of trafficking, and often who come out and become activists for the cause. And I meet them in an activist capacity, which is very, very different than, you know, going to a jail or going to the police department to do counseling or crisis intervention. So So yeah, you usually have a social work degree if you do that, or some type of degree that prepares you to do that kind of work.